She was America's sweetheart. He was Hollywood's leading man. Together, they created movie magic that still sparkles today. But behind those legendary smiles and that undeniable chemistry lurked a secret so devastating that Doris Day carried the sting of betrayal for the rest of her life. This is the story of the one person she truly hated more than anyone else. What happens when the fairy tale you sold to millions turns out to be nothing but smoke and mirrors? When the friend you trusted becomes the symbol of everything fake about Hollywood? Doris Day spent decades as one of the brightest stars in entertainment history. But there was one dark shadow she could never shake, one relationship that went from professional partnership to personal wound. And the shocking truth behind it all didn't just hurt her feelings, it made her question everything she thought she knew about loyalty, honesty, and the price of fame. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will completely change how you see one of Hollywood's most iconic on-screen couples. Let's rewind to April 3, 1922, when a baby girl named Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff entered the world in Cincinnati, Ohio. Nobody could have predicted that this kid from a working-class neighborhood would become one of the most recognized voices of the 20th century. Her childhood unfolded during America's toughest economic chapter, the Great Depression, but even in those lean years, young Doris sparkled with an energy that couldn't be dimmed. Dance floors were her first love. While other kids played hopscotch, she was perfecting her footwork, spinning and leaping with dreams of Broadway lighting up her imagination. She wasn't just dabbling either. This girl had serious talent, winning competitions alongside her dance partner and mapping out a future in professional dance. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. Then came the car crash that shattered everything, literally. The accident didn't just break her leg, it pulverized her dreams into a million pieces. Picture being a teenager watching your entire future evaporate in a single moment of twisted metal and screaming pain. For months, Doris was trapped at home, her dancer's body now a prison of casts and rehabilitation. But here's where fate gets interesting. Stuck in her bedroom with nothing but a radio for company, she started singing along. Not just humming, really singing. And what emerged from that desperate situation was a voice so pure, so effortlessly beautiful, that it would carry her further than her feet ever could have. Sometimes our greatest gifts are born from our deepest disappointments. Word spread fast about the girl who could sing like an angel. Local bands started calling, and before long she was performing with professional musicians. That's when bandleader Barney Rapp entered the picture with a game-changing suggestion. Kappelhoff wasn't exactly marquee-friendly, so inspired by her performance of Day After Day, he convinced her to become Doris Day. Just like that, a star name was born. The real breakthrough came when she joined Les Brown's orchestra in the mid-1940s. This wasn't some small-time gig. Les Brown was massive, and singing with his band put Doris in front of audiences coast to coast. Then came Sentimental Journey in 1945, and everything exploded. That song hit America right in the heart. World War II was ending, soldiers were coming home, and Doris's voice became the soundtrack of reunion and hope. It wasn't just popular, it was transformative. Her tone carried something that technical perfection alone could never achieve, genuine emotion that listeners could feel in their bones. She wasn't performing at people, she was connecting with them, reaching through the speakers to offer comfort when the world desperately needed it. When you've got a voice that can stop a nation in its tracks, Hollywood notices. In 1948, Doris made her film debut in Romance on the High Seas, and what the studio executives saw on screen confirmed what her recordings had already suggested. This woman was special. She had that rare combination that can't be taught or faked: natural beauty without intimidating glamour, warmth without seeming desperate, comic timing that felt spontaneous rather than rehearsed. Audiences didn't just admire Doris Day, they trusted her. She felt like someone you'd actually know, your talented neighbor who happened to be gorgeous and could sing like nobody's business. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, she became Hollywood royalty, commanding top dollar and headlining films that showcased every dimension of her talent.
Sure, she could sing, everyone knew that, but could she act? Love Me or Leave Me in 1955 answered that question with a thunderous yes. Playing singer Ruth Etting, Doris revealed dramatic depths that shocked critics who'd typecast her as just another pretty songbird. This performance had grit, darkness, and emotional complexity that announced she was a serious actress, not just a musical personality. Then Alfred Hitchcock came calling for The Man Who Knew Too Much in 1956, and Doris delivered one of the most memorable moments in cinema history. Que sera, whatever will be, wasn't just a catchy tune. It became a cultural phenomenon, winning an Academy Award and transforming into a life philosophy for millions. That song captured something essential about Doris herself: acceptance, optimism, and grace under pressure. The late 50s and early 60s belonged to her. Romantic comedies, particularly her legendary partnerships with Rock Hudson, Pillow Talk in 1959, Lover Come Back in 1961, Send Me No Flowers in 1964, these films defined sophisticated Hollywood romance for an entire generation. Doris brought intelligence and independence to roles that could have been one-dimensional. Her characters had agency, wit, and self-respect, subtly pushing against the era's constraints on women while still entertaining audiences with pure charm. Beyond movies, her recording career was staggering. Hundreds of songs across genres, from jazz to pop to traditional standards. She ranks among the best-selling female artists of all time, and her recordings still sound fresh decades later because that voice never relied on tricks or gimmicks, just honest emotion delivered with flawless technique.
But while Doris's professional life soared, her personal life told a much more complicated story. Love kept finding her, but it never seemed to last. Her first marriage at just 19 to trombonist Al Jordan started with youthful hope and ended in darkness. Jordan was abusive, turning what should have been a partnership into a nightmare. Their son Terry became the light of Doris's life, but the marriage itself was poisonous. In 1943, showing incredible courage for that era, she walked away, choosing safety over the social pressure to stay. Saxophonist George Weidler became husband number 2 in 1946. This relationship offered stability and companionship, but it couldn't withstand the crushing weight of her exploding fame. By 1949, it was over, another casualty of the price Hollywood success extracts from personal relationships. Marriage number 3 proved the most significant and ultimately the most damaging. Martin Melcher entered her life in 1951 as both husband and business partner, producing many of her biggest films and adopting her son Terry. For 17 years they were married, a period that coincided with her absolute peak as a star. But Melcher's death in 1968 revealed a devastating truth. He'd been catastrophically mismanaging her finances. The woman who'd earned millions discovered she was nearly broke, her trust exploited by the man who was supposed to protect her interests. That betrayal cut deep, not just financially, but emotionally. She tried one more time with restaurateur Barry Comden in 1976, seeking companionship away from Hollywood's spotlight. But by 1981, that marriage too had crumbled. 4 marriages, 4 heartbreaks. Yet through it all, Doris never became bitter or cynical. She simply became more private, more protective, and more determined to live on her own terms. Now we arrive at the relationship that would haunt her for decades: Rock Hudson. To the world, they were perfection. The chemistry between Doris Day and Rock Hudson practically sizzled through the screen. Their romantic comedies weren't just successful, they defined an entire genre. Audiences couldn't get enough of their playful banter, their perfectly timed comedy, their seemingly effortless connection. They looked like they belonged together, like the cameras were simply capturing something real. Doris believed in authenticity above everything else. In an industry built on illusion, she valued straightforward honesty. She once said she believed in being straightforward because without that, you didn't have much. That core value made what happened with Rock Hudson feel like a fundamental violation.
Here's what she didn't know during all those years of filming, publicity, and interviews. Rock Hudson was gay. In Hollywood's golden age, that was a secret the studio system guarded more fiercely than nuclear codes. Hudson's sexuality was carefully hidden, protected by an elaborate network of publicists, arranged dates, and even a brief marriage designed purely for appearances. Doris was completely in the dark. When the truth eventually became public knowledge years later, she wasn't just surprised, she was devastated. Let's be crystal clear about what bothered her. It wasn't Hudson's sexuality itself. Doris wasn't some pearl-clutching moralist horrified who he loved. What destroyed her was the deception. It wasn't what he was, she explained later. It was that everyone knew but me. Think about how that must have felt. Everyone, the studio heads, the producers, the publicists, probably half of Hollywood. Everyone knew except the woman standing next to him in scene after scene, selling romance to millions of moviegoers. She'd been used as a prop in someone else's closet, a beard without even knowing it. I trusted Rock, she admitted with obvious pain. We spent years laughing, rehearsing, working side by side. I thought there was honesty between us. That trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired. She felt manipulated, humiliated, and fundamentally deceived by someone she'd considered a friend. The public continued romanticizing their partnership for decades, constantly asking about their chemistry and their special relationship, and Doris had to smile through it all, knowing it was based on a lie. People talked about us as if it were real, and I had to smile along with it, knowing it wasn't. That forced performance, having to maintain the illusion even after learning the truth, became its own form of torture. She believed Hudson, protected by the studio system and public sympathy, never truly paid the price for the deception, while she carried the emotional weight of it alone. When Rock Hudson publicly revealed his AIDS diagnosis in the 1980s, becoming one of the first major celebrities to face the disease, Doris's emotions grew even more complicated. She wasn't heartless, she supported AIDS research and showed compassion for those suffering, but she refused to let tragedy erase history. "I was sorry for him," she said quietly, "but that didn't erase what happened." Those words reveal everything. She could feel sympathy for his suffering while still holding on to her anger about the years of lies. One didn't cancel out the other. In private conversations, she was even more direct. "I felt foolish, and I don't like being made a fool of." That's the core of it right there. This wasn't about being offended or scandalized. It was about being deceived by someone she trusted, made to look naive while everyone else was in on the secret. Her harshest judgment wasn't reserved solely for Hudson, though. She directed plenty of anger towards the studio system that demanded such deceptions, that built careers on carefully constructed lies and forced everyone to play along. But in her memory, Hudson remained the face of that betrayal, the person she'd worked alongside while being kept deliberately in the dark.
Hollywood desperately wanted to preserve the fairy tale of Doris and Rock as the perfect romantic pair, but Doris refused to play along anymore. "What you saw on screen wasn't my life," she stated firmly, "and it wasn't the truth." That simple declaration cuts through decades of manufactured nostalgia. Yes, their films were wonderful. Yes, their chemistry was real in a professional sense. But the romance everyone believed in? That was fiction, and she wanted people to know it. She lived long enough to tell her story on her own terms, something not every Hollywood star of her era managed. While film history remembers her and Rock Hudson as cinematic soulmates, her words stand as a permanent reminder that behind those smiles was a woman who felt deeply wronged and never quite forgave it. Doris Day passed away peacefully on May 13, 2019, at her cherished home in Carmel Valley, California. She was 97 years old, having lived a life longer and fuller than most people dared to dream. Pneumonia took her gently, a quiet end for someone whose life had been anything but quiet. The announcement came from the Doris Day Animal Foundation, the organization she'd poured her heart into during her later years. That detail tells you everything about how she chose to spend her final decades, not chasing more fame or reliving past glories, but advocating for creatures who couldn't speak for themselves. True to form, she'd left specific instructions: no funeral, no grave marker, no public memorials, nothing grand or ceremonial. She wanted to be remembered through her work, her kindness to animals, and the joy she'd brought to people's lives. No monuments, no rituals, just the legacy of a woman who believed in substance over spectacle. The world mourned anyway, of course. Social media filled with tributes, classic films played on television, and Que Sera Sera echoed through millions of homes one more time. But Doris had the last word on how she'd be remembered, choosing simplicity and privacy, even in death. So what do we take away from Doris Day's complicated relationship with Rock Hudson? Maybe it's this: even the brightest stars carry shadows. Even the most beloved friendships can hide painful truths. And sometimes the person who seems to have it all, the fame, the talent, the admiration of millions, is carrying a wound that never quite heals. Doris Day gave us music that still moves us, films that still make us laugh, and a screen presence that defined an era. But she was also a real woman who valued honesty, who felt betrayed when that honesty was denied to her, and who refused to pretend otherwise just because it made for a better story. The studio system wanted her to be America's sweetheart forever, always smiling, always gracious, always playing along. But Doris Day was more than that. She was complicated, principled, and willing to speak uncomfortable truths even when silence would have been easier. That's not just celebrity gossip. That's a woman claiming her own narrative in an industry that tried to write it for her. Her resentment toward Rock Hudson wasn't petty or small-minded. It was the justified anger of someone who discovered that a cherished professional relationship had been built on a foundation of secrets she never agreed to keep. And she had every right to feel that way, tragedy and sympathy notwithstanding. If this story changed how you see Hollywood's golden age, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. What do you think? Was Doris Day right to hold on to that resentment, or should she have let it go? And which of her films is your absolute favorite? I read every comment and I love hearing your perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're diving deep into more untold Hollywood stories that will make you see your favorite stars in a completely new light. These legends weren't just faces on a screen. They were real people with real feelings, real struggles, and real stories that deserve to be told. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.